Okay, this is chapter 2 of the Kildee house. Jerome Kildee might have lived to a ripe old age in his house on the top of the mountain without ever knowing anything about his neighbors if he had not discovered that he could talk and sing too. Once a man finds he can talk, his neighbors are more likely to be friendly. Jerome did not go visiting, but he was pleasant and talked quite a bit when one of his neighbors dropped in on him on a Saturday afternoon. His visitor was one of the 9 Eppies. Emma Lou Eppie had been wanting to visit Jerome's cabin for a long time. She had met him a number of times down at the mailbox. His silence when she spoke to him had made her afraid of him. Then, shortly after Jerome and Old Grouch had enjoyed their evening of song, she met him again. She would have scooted past him, but he smiled at her. Emma Lou smiled back. "Good morning, Mr. Kildee," she said. "It is a fine morning," Jerome agreed, "a fine morning indeed." It seemed to Emma Lou that he was tasting the words the way you would taste a candy bar, and she was right. Jerome was finding it very nice to say it was a nice day. After he had gone up the trail leading to his house, Emma Lou decided she would pay him a visit. She had a very definite reason for wanting to make friends with Jerome. She was having a bitter feud with Donald Roger Cabot. If she had the run of Jerome's Hill, that would extend her territory right into the Cabot backyard. When Emma Lou declared war on anyone, she meant business. Where the Eppies came from, mountain folks carried on their feuds in a serious manner. The battle had started over Donald Roger's dog, Strongheart, a Doberman pup of the bluest blood. With Donald Roger along to do the sicking, Strongheart was a deadly enemy to cats and to all wild animals in the woods. With her scheme in her head, Emma Lou took the mail to the Eppie house. Usually the Eppies got only mail addressed to rural boxholder, but today there was a letter from a fur house in St. Louis for Ben Eppie, the youngest son. The Eppie house stood in a redwood grove, which is known to the romantic-minded as a temple. The mother tree had surrounded herself with a circle of children. The children were now grown to giant size, and the mother tree had long since vanished. The giants stood in a stately circle around a shady patio, like padres guarding a shrine. The green twilight and the silence of a redwood temple never fail to draw the passerby into its shade, and many a wanderer has built a house inside a grove only to feel the cold displeasure of the padres. A damp clamminess creeps into the beds in the house. The wallpaper turns green, and the chill gets into the bones of the dwellers. The smoke is pushed back down the chimney. Someone has built a house in this temple and later had abandoned it after braving the displeasure of the big trees for a season or two. One spring, the Eppies came chugging along the side road in their old truck. There were just 6 Eppies at that time. Job Eppie halted the truck in the shade of the biggest tree. He slid his long legs from under the steering wheel and eased himself out of the old truck. Silly got out. The boys piled off the stack of household stuff in the back, Muck, Reddy, and Ma Grady. The Eppie hounds hustled sniffs around the base of the big tree, awed at seeing a tree so big that proper sniffing called for quite a run. "Mighty pretty place," Silly said. Job just looked up at the trees. He came from a timber country, but he had never seen such trees before. Amby, the oldest boy, started toward the cabin, eager to search for treasure. Amby, being 14, had explored many deserted cabins and knew that someone was always ahead of you. But that did not dampen his eagerness. There might be something overlooked. Different folks looked for different things. His 3 brothers ran after him. Amby saw, as soon as he stepped into the big main room, that many people had explored this house. Most of its window panes were broken, old magazines littered the floor, a pile of rusting tin cans and brown bottles lay in a corner. Amby kicked a can across the floor. "Shucks," he said. "Smells ratty," Enoch said. Silly and Job stepped to the door. When Silly looked into the house, she said breathlessly, "Job, it's got a wooden floor in it." The Eppies moved right in, and after a while, Job located the owner and bought the house and the bottom land below it. The Eppies liked the wilderness, the timberland, and the steep slopes choked with brush. Job cut timbers for fences and for woods, but he would as soon have cut off his leg as to cut down one of the redwoods. Oak and madrona fell before the Eppie axes, and the wood was sold in town. Like many other family coming to California, the Eppies added a bit of their own way of life to their new home. The grove was soon littered with old cars and trucks and odds and ends Job picked up in the trades. Emma Lou loved the place. This was home. She loved the redwood walls of the house, which had turned deep brown with age. She thought the fireplace Job and Amby had built was a masterpiece. By the time the Eppie family had reached 9 members, Job had added 3 rooms to the house. Before Jerome had bought the 100-acre hill, the Eppies had considered it a part of their domain and had hunted and trapped over it. But as soon as Jerome moved in, they kept their hounds at home and seldom hunted on his land. Joe believed a good neighbor minded his own business and did not trespass unless invited to hunt. Jerome had never made any attempt to get friendly, so the Eppies stayed off his land. Emma Lou dropped Ben's letter on the kitchen table. Silly was shelling peas at the sink. "Fur list for Ben," Emma Lou said as she moved out of the kitchen fast. Silly might think of something she ought to be doing if she stayed around. She was out of hearing before Silly thought of anything. And Silly is spelled Cilly, so maybe it's short for Cecilia or something, I don't know. Emma Lou knew a trail which wound up the hill through brush and heavy timber. Job and his sons had not trespassed upon Jerome's land, but Emma Lou had been over every foot of it. She did not hunt or trap, but she liked to hike and climb trees and watch Jerome's friends as they went about their business. She knew more about the animals on Jerome's hill than he did. She was delayed in arriving at Jerome's house because she detoured past a fern-choked dell where a black-tailed doe had cached her fawn. Emma Lou crawled through a blackberry patch with some damage to her arms and bare legs. The doe was always feeding. When Emma Lou parted the ferns over the baby's bed, the fawn played dead. Emma Lou tickled its ear. The fawn flapped its ear, then plastered it against its neck very quickly. Emma Lou let the ferns swing back into place. When she got back to the trail, she looked as though she had been in a cat fight. Standing there, she frowned. She was thinking about Donald Roger Cabot. Just let me catch that dog chasing my deer, she said, and balled her fingers into fists. Just let me catch him out in the woods. Her hand dropped to her hip pocket, where the handle of a beanie stuck out a couple of inches. She had a dozen marbles in a side pocket. Marbles did not curve like stones when they were shot. They went straight as a bullet. With 6 brothers as teachers, Emma Lou had learned much about the art of using a beanie, and that's a slingshot. She moved up on the trail, her anger mounting as she remembered the clash she had had with Donald Roger earlier that week. She had come upon them in the woods near the mailbox. Strongheart was worrying a possum he had flushed, and Donald Roger was urging him on. Emma Lou's beanie had settled Strongheart's hash, but it had cost her a prized marble. In her haste to save the possum, she had shot the dog with her bird's eye glassy. A hasty retreat had saved Donald Roger from suffering the same fate as his dog. Strongheart had arrived home with a knot on his rump as big as a hen's egg. So she shot the dog because they were hunting a possum. Emma Lou always went over exciting events when she was alone in the woods. Sometimes she acted out things she hoped would happen. Sometimes she just went back over things that had happened and thought of how she could have said or done something else. She had thought of a lot of things she could have done to Donald Roger, things she would do the next time she met him out in the woods sending his dog after a poor possum. She was flushed and angry when she burst from the woods above Jerome's cabin. Slowing down, she fanned her face with her straw hat. As she looked at the house, her curiosity made her forget she was angry. She had looked at the house from the cover of the woods, but she had never seen the inside of it. Mr. Kildee certainly had a very fine window. She had never seen such a window outside of a store in town. She began to worry. He might be grouchy and look at her the way he usually did. Then she remembered he had smiled at her down at the mailbox, and she had said it was a very nice day. She stepped to the door and found it open. Here's a picture of her stepping to the door and finding it open. And you can see the baby raccoon family there in the corner. When she looked into the room, she saw Jerome seated at his table. Old Grouch and his wife sat on the floor with their children near them. They were seated in a small circle and were all eating busily. Emma Lou blinked. She thought she must be seeing things, but no, she wasn't. A soft thud made her look toward Jerome's fireplace. She saw 2 little spotted skunks hop down out of the chimney. They shook soot from their fur before seating themselves upon the hearth. Sitting there, they eyed Jerome and grinned. "Hello," Emma Lou said. Jerome turned his head. When he saw Emma Lou, he smiled. When he spoke, his voice was very friendly. "Won't you come in? We're eating. You can join us." Old Grouch stared hard at Emma Lou. His wife smiled sweetly, but she began shooing her babies toward the box in the corner. Jerome cast an eye toward the little skunks. There might be trouble if they decided to dash out through the door and got this girl excited. But the little skunks did not dash any place. They were busy washing soot off their white spots. They were traveled folks. They knew all about the 9 Eppies and their house, especially the cellar, which housed quite a few families of mice. They knew Emma Lou better than they knew Jerome. Did you see it?
Yeah, they're gonna go all the way into the woods.
Okay, could you go back out? I'm going to finish right now reading my story, and then we'll talk. They knew Emma better Lou. I know. They knew Emma Lou better than they knew Jerome. They had lived for a time in her cellar. The Eppie's hounds had caused them to seek other quarters. Emma Lou entered the cabin. She sat down on the floor. Papa and Mama walked up to her. They sat up and regarded her intently, their eyes watching her hands and then moving to the little pocket in her blouse. Emma Lou looked up at Jerome. "I came off without any scraps," she said. Jerome handed her a strip of crisp bacon. Emma Lou broke it into bits. She gave a small piece to each skunk. They broke into loud churring sounds as they ate the bacon. Emma Lou laughed. "Nice little stinkers, aren't they?" She looked up at Jerome. Old Grouch snarled, then he dashed for the door. He was so fat he really wobbled. He reminded Emmy Lou of a duck. When he got outside, he began calling names in a very loud voice. "He's old Grouch," Jerome said, "but once you get to know him, he isn't bad company." "He licked Ma Grady to a frazzle," Emma Lou said. "I guess he can smell hound on me. Of course, Ma Grady is getting awfully old. I guess that's her grandma. Silly's the mom, and Ma Grady is the grandma." She looked out at old Grouch, who was seated on the doorstone. "Don't think he could do it now. He's too fat. So I guess I thought Silly was the sister. I'm pretty sure she's the mom, and Ma Grady is the grandma." "Don't think he could do it now. He's too fat." "Who's Ma Grady?" Jerome asked. "Oh, I'm wrong. Look at that. I'm making hypothesis, and I'm wrong. One of our hound dogs." Emma Lou reached out and gathered Mama into her arms. Jerome held his breath. Mama churred happily as she nosed for bits of bacon inside Emma Lou's hand. Papa climbed up and joined her. When the bacon was all gone, she set them on the floor and they marched outside. They put the run on old Grouch and took over the doorstone. Emma Lou got to her feet. She gave her attention to the inside of the cabin. She had been looking at everything while she fed the skunks, but she hadn't wanted to seem impolite or curious. She admired the fireplace and the bark wall before she got to the part that really had her curious, the buttons dangling from the ceiling. "What are they for?" she asked Jerome. Jerome got to his feet. He was eager to demonstrate his inventions. He pulled a button and a cupboard door opened. He pulled another button and a drawer popped out. "I figured them out to fool Mrs. Grouch," he explained. Mrs. Grouch had hopped out of her box the instant the drawer popped open. It was the egg drawer, and she thought Jerome was going to have an egg. She looked disappointed when he shoved the drawer shut without taking out the egg. "You have the most wonderful house I've ever seen," Emma Lou said, "and you have nice friends. But when Donald Roger Cabot and his townhound get up here, there'll be trouble." She shook her red head and scowled. "But he won't trouble you any. I'll take care of that." Jerome didn't know just what to say. He had met Donald Roger and Strongheart a number of times, and he had been a bit worried, but he had never seen them very high on this side of the mountain. He smiled suddenly. "Strongheart? The name hardly fits his dog." "I'll say not," Emma Lou said. "That hound is afraid of his own shadow. Cabot sticks him on, but he won't tackle anything unless it runs away from him." Jerome grinned. She looked really angry. He shoved another chair up to the table. "I'll set a plate on for you," he said. Emma Lou sat down. Her anger vanished as quickly as it had flared up. She laughed when Mrs. Grouch came trotting over to the table. Leaning down, she scratched her behind her ears. "I don't have any milk except canned," Jerome said as he set the coffee pot on the table. "I'll have coffee black," Emma said. "I drink it sort of strong," Jerome said uncertainly. "Me too. I'm no sissy pants. Some day I'll be 6 feet tall like my brothers and just as tough." Jerome saw she wasn't joking. He poured a cup of coffee for her and shoved the sugar across the table. Emma Lou ignored the sugar. She took bacon and jam and bread. As Jerome watched her drink the black coffee, he wondered why her folks let her have it. But she had a fine appetite. She ate twice as much as he ever ate in one meal. And as she ate, she kept looking at his fireplace. "You have a wonderful fireplace," she said. "Made it myself." There was a touch of pride in Jerome's voice. "You could make a lot of money building fireplaces," Emma Lou said. Jerome shook his head. "I'm not doing any more stonework. I walled my tools in the back of the last stone. I guess I'll let them stay there." "What do you do?" Emma Lou asked. "Nothing," Jerome said and smiled. That must be swell," she sighed. "This is my idea of how to live." They chatted on for a while. Old Grouch came in after the skunks went away. He waddled over the box and carried on an argument with his wife in an undertone. Emma Lou helped with the dishes. When they were stacked away, she knew she must go. The Eppies were in for heavy suppers. The Eppies went in for heavy suppers. Her mother would be getting things ready. In about an hour, Silly would need her. That hour would give her time to circle around by the Cabot place just to look things over. I'll have to run along, she said, but I've had a good time. Come back again, Jerome said as he stepped to the door with her. I will, and very soon, Emma Lou promised. And that's chapter 2 of the Kildee house.